Hey everyone, Joe Kiedinger with another 30-minute slowdown. Happy Thursday to all of you as we all do what we can during this time of uncertainty. And I want to stress that your thoughts matter. Last week we talked about the words you speak. Well, certainly the thoughts come before the words. So we have to be in control of the thoughts that we have in our head, because those thoughts can become mental monsters if not navigated properly. So I put a little list like I do to keep me on track for this next 30 minutes. And we're going to be talking about how to shut down negativity during this fear-filled state that we're in right now. There's a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty, and there are many of you watching this who it's real. It's real. You could be an entrepreneur where things have been completely wiped out for now because of the industry you're in. And so I get it, it's real. And no matter how real something is, we still have the ability to control our thoughts. And so let's talk about, how do you do that? How do you do that when things are unknown? Because that's what fear is. Fear is not knowing what to expect. And so we get nervous and our brain starts to complete the sentence and complete this scenario and make mountains out of molehills. So let's take this one step at a time, and I'd like to start with a story called The Chinese Farmer. And once upon a time, there was a Chinese farmer, and he was one of the most beloved people in all the land. He was profitable, he was kind, and people just loved the guy. And he had one son, and this son could do the work of 5 men. He was a strapping young lad in his young 20s. They had lots of oxen and animals, and of course they had their crops that he would bring to the farmer's market once a week. And the townspeople would see him and they just loved him, and he was prosperous. Well, one day his son had an accident while working and he broke his leg. And word spread through the grapevine, and when the Chinese farmer arrived at the farmer's market, the folks came to him and said, "You must be devastated. You must be destroyed. Your only son, who could do the work of 5 men, is injured. How will you run your farm? You must be just devastated." And he said, "Maybe, maybe not. I don't know." So life moves on, and the Chinese government broke into war, and they decided to draft all the young men, but they couldn't draft the Chinese farmer's son because he had a broken leg. So the townspeople, of course, realized this, and at the farmer's market they said, "You must be so overjoyed. Your only son will not go off to war with the threat of being killed because of his broken leg. How fortunate you are." He said, "Maybe, maybe not. I don't know." So time passed. And as the young man was healing, he could help a little bit more with the chores. And he's hobbling around the farm trying to help, and through his pain, which distracted him, he left the gate unlocked, the gate that kept all the animals safe from harm. Something that night startled the animals, and it created a stampede. And that gate opened up, and all the animals ran out into the wilderness. So now one of the wealthiest farmers in the land was one of the poorest. Of course, the townspeople heard this, and they came to him during the farmer's market and said, "Wow, you must be devastated. Once the healthiest, most profitable farm in the land, now you're one of the poorest. You must be devastated." And he said, "Maybe, maybe not. I don't know." Good news! The Chinese government won the war. And they took the spoils from their enemy, and they dictated that those who have the most shall get the least, and those who have the least will get the most. Well, the Chinese farmer had virtually nothing. So he was doubly blessed with livestock, more than he ever had to begin with. And his son was now healthy. And of course, the folks ran to the farmer's market, talked to the Chinese farmer and said, "We are so happy for you. You must be so overjoyed. Now, once the poorest, now for sure the wealthiest farmer in the land." And he said, "Maybe, maybe not." So I ask you, what's the moral of that story? Now, some people say the moral of the story might be, look at the bright side of things, or don't be too quick to judge a situation. And all those morals can be calculated from that story. What I want you to focus on is that events have no meaning. only in the meaning you give them. I'm going to say that again. Events in and of themselves have zero meaning, only in the meaning you decide to give them. Let me give you an example. If I told you that a plane crashed in a field in Iowa, killing all 12 on board, and if I were to ask you, is that a good event or a bad event, you would certainly say, that's bad. However, if I gave you more information, and I said that plane was filled with the Taliban, and they were going to dive bomb the White House, and they had engine problems, and they crashed and perished, you would say, well, that's good. The brain is so eager and willing to label any event good or bad when the fact remains that the event itself has no meaning. You decide what to name it. Now consider this. Last week I shared with you that our brain is wired to be 80% negative. 80% of the time our brain wants to define something as bad. Think about driving in a car and you get cut off. We respond with this like road rage type of thing, as if we've never cut anyone else off in our entire life. We become righteous and arrogant, and we think, that's bad, and we're like, how dare you? But if you really sat back and looked at it, every time you cut someone off, when you know you've been distracted, what do? Sorry about that. And you think that that thought translates over to that other driver going, oh, no problem, buddy. I've done it myself. It doesn't. They're cursing you back. It doesn't make any sense. That is how our brain works in all things that are unknown. And it wants to lie to us. So let me tell you about how the brain works a little bit, because I think the more you know, the more you can control. Let's look at the facts. So here's the brain. Remember in the 80s, it was here's your brain and here's your brain on drugs and all that kind of stuff. Well, it's kind of like that. Here's your brain and here's your brain in its natural state. And here's your brain with emotional intelligence, which is what we're going to grow. So I'm not a drawer. Boy, this thing doesn't work at all. Let's try the black one. All right, we got this. I'm going to really simplify the brain here. We have a middle brain. We're going to call this the brain stem. That's the stuff you have no control over. It keeps your heart beating. When you get cold, your hair stands on end. It does stuff. It makes sure your body is digesting and doing all that stuff. We'll call that the brain stem. Completely unconscious, unaware. It just works. On the outside, we have the cerebral cortex. So I'm going to put cortex. Right? This is the left lobe and the right lobe. And they say that if you're, creative, like if you're left-handed, you tend to be more creative because the right side of your brain, which is the opposite, is the creative side, and your logical is the left, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, that's cerebral cortex. Now, please know that this part of the brain is your sanity. Okay, this part of your brain actually calculates your spatial environment. It's logic. It's where language is stored. It's where your long-term memory lies. It's where your spatial, I tell the wall's there, I can tell this is here. Like your reality is framed in your cerebral cortex as far as your physical reality, not your emotional reality. That is in this center part of your brain, which we'll call it is called the limbic system. The limbic system. This is where your emotions lie. This is where your sense of smell resides. And it's directly connected to the long-term memory function in the cerebral cortex. There's an immediate connection because it's emotional. The limbic system is our emotions, our motivation, what motivates us, how we feel about something, all comes within here. And within the limbic system is a little devil. And that little devil is called the amygdala. The amygdala. It is about the tip of your thumb, and that resides within the limbic system, and it stores all of your emotional memories. And it's kind of like the gatekeeper to every event. So if someone cuts you off, the amygdala says, you've been wrong before in your life. This is what's happening again. This person's purposefully wronging you. They're planning their trip to work. They're making sure that they've plotted your life for the last 2 weeks, and they know at 8 a.m. at that corner, you're going to arrive and they're going to cut you off. A perfectly executed plan. And if that was true, then you have every right to say, you son of a... If that was true, but you know it's not. Logically, it's not true that someone would plot your demise by calculating when you arrive to work at a certain time at a certain intersection and then purposefully cut you off in that moment. Come on, but yet we react as if that's the truth. That's our emotional side, our emotion. And the negativity and the fear comes from the emotional side of the brain. The facts don't always back it up. Fear, I heard it once as an acronym, described as false evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real. Now, let's be true to today's predicament that we're in. There are facts that say there is this thing traveling across the world, and people have gotten sick, and people have died, and the fact is that we are being quarantined, and the fact is that I cannot work. I'm not taking that away. You're right. Those are all the facts. And you define what that really means for you. You define what you can control in this moment. Negative emotions. Negative emotions lie in a decision to define what this event means. All right, so let me erase this. We had a little similar diagram last week. Very simple because I am not an artist by any means. All right. Okay, that's a person. That's you. All right. Here's the event. Event lies here. You get cut off. Event is you're asked to be quarantined and work from home. The event is someone said something to you, Skyped something to you, emailed anything. That's an event. And you decide, is it good or is it bad? And could it be neutral? Which would be right in here. Good, bad, or neutral. Remember, your brain wants to label it. And 80% of the time, it wants to label it as bad. That's where all negativity comes in. It's just part of the science of the brain. And if you're unaware of these things, you have very little or no control over it. And my hope is that I give you some awareness, and you can even start studying more of this on your own. Which brings us to your imagination. Your imagination is a powerful tool. The imagination built Disney World, created Mickey Mouse, Universal Studios, Harry Potter. What an imagination. What an imagination. To come up with a series of many books talking about Harry Potter and his adventures and be able to dream that all up in your mind and then get it all written down. Oh my gosh, J.K. Rowling, she's just an imagination genius. The way she was able to see it vividly in her mind, it's a powerful, beautiful thing. The imagination also helps us imagine what could be better, how we could get over things. And the imagination also takes a molehill and builds it up into an enormous mountain. And we experience that almost every day at work or at home. Someone can say one thing and your imagination takes over. It's almost like a television. Call it the imagination television. The ITV, actually now there is an ITV, but this is the imagination television. So think about a simple thing. Like I explained, getting cut off, right? That your brain's going, you tried to do all this stuff that happens in a split second. Think about when someone comes to you and looks at a report. You did this report and you worked very hard on it. And they look through the report and they say something like, oh, interesting. I wouldn't have done it that way. And then they walk away. Wow, you're sitting there going, oh, excuse me? Are you kidding me? And then your brain goes, I can't believe they said that. What does that even mean? Interesting, I wouldn't have done it that way. And your imagination starts to say things like, they must think I'm incompetent. I think they want my job. It starts to escalate. They're out to sabotage me in my entire career, and it keeps growing. I bet they're talking about all the other employees about me. And then later you find out when you have more information that the person actually was admiring your work. So when they said, I wouldn't have done it that way, you gave them inspiration where they actually started doing it your way. But because of the way they communicate, because of the way their tone was, and because your brain is wired to be 80% negative, you interpreted that as actually an insult, which is not the truth. Because our emotions lie to us. And I should say our negative emotions lie to us. So be aware of that. When you feel that twinge of the amygdala going, that's bad, the amygdala stores up all these bad emotional memories you have, and the good ones, and it tries to match what's happening now with what happened back in the past, which have relatively no meaning to each other. And it's why our brain is so wired to be negative. The amygdala has to filter all these events, and it tries to match something to the past. And an event like being cut off in a car is closely related to being insulted by a human being. So you can't pick it out logically, but in your subconscious, it's attaching those two, saying you are being insulted. So be aware that your negative emotions lie to you. So what do? How do we begin to shut down those negative thoughts before they become mental monsters? That's where emotional intelligence comes in. That's where your character can be grown. So, we need to choose that this event is neutral or good. How do we do that? It takes a conscious decision. A conscious decision to look at every event and pause. So, in the case of being cut off in a car, the stimulus is coming in, that's the driver cutting you off, then there's this line, and then you react. You son of a... Goes boom, hits the line, and you react. May I suggest you do something a little different? Pause. Stimulus comes in. Person cuts you off. Pause. They're distracted. That's what that really means. That's what that event means. They're distracted like the rest of us. They got things on their mind. I get it. And now you're not reacting. You're responding. You're not reacting. You're responding. So now I ask you, how are you responding to this situation? Are you reacting? Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Or are you responding? Are you pausing? Are you pausing? Because in your reaction, you alienate the very people that are looking for you for safety and emotional support. So if I may, go to the logical of this situation. Let's go to the cerebral cortex and let's look at some facts. The facts are, we literally are in this together. The entire world is in this together. Let's boil it down to just the United States. We're all in this together. GM shut their plant down. Ford shut their plant down. There's going to be more. That's the facts. And we're all in this together, which means there's a huge amount of empathy out there. Banks are empathetic, realizing that it's not your fault. There are successful, wildly successful entrepreneurs with no fault of their own have lost everything. They owe the bank some money. Is it in the bank's best interest to go, oh, sorry, I'll take your... They can't take all this stuff back. They can't. We're all in this together. There is a ton of empathy out there. And we must pause and look at ourselves and respond accordingly. Now, there are certain things we can do. We can call our financial institutions if we're really hit. We can ask for some pause of payments for 3 or 4 months. We can reach out and have open dialogue and communicate based on the reality of the situation, which everyone gets. No one doesn't get it. I don't see people being kicked out of homes. I don't see the heat being turned off. I don't see any of this happening if you don't have a penny to your name right now and can't move on. I don't see any of that happening. Not in America. Not in this community where we're all in it together. Everyone gets it. So my encouragement for you is, certainly we have responsibilities, certainly. It's to put it in perspective. It's to pause and be very aware of what this really means for you and how you're going to respond to it. Because in the end, as leaders, we must be in control of our thoughts. Our thoughts matter because it gives out an energy of comfort and calm, whether you're remote or whether you all work together. So that's my encouragement for you this Thursday. Now, go out there and respond to the situation, bring your team together, and have a great week. I'll see you next week.